How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the Proving Ground Review. Just another couple minutes and we'll get started. Whose alert's going off? Oh, I was chatting into the general group, so it's not an alert, it's just the general chat. Oh, awesome. So we're gonna go ahead and get started, guys. I've got a good one for you guys tonight, so I hope you guys appreciate it. So I think part of training and coaching individuals, I was having this conversation multiple times actually this week, is that a lot of times our approach is not as cut and dry as we may present it, right? There are some exceptions, right? The proving ground patterns, things like that, that's cut and dry. I mean, it's here's the pattern. When it's present, here are the recommended pips. I mean, that stuff is cut and dry. But if I showed you how I trade, right? Now the patterns are for you guys, right? They're awesome, 90+%. I mean, they do awesome, and I know a lot of you guys are reporting that you're taking more than the recommended take profit on those, and that's incredible. I'm glad to hear that. But the way I trade is different than that, right? And I analyze from the 1 day, 240, 60 minute, 30 minute, 5 minute, all the way back. And I use all that information along with my technicals, everything on my checklist, and so on and so forth. There are a million different variations of what would constitute a buy and a sell on, in a particular situation where, say, for example, the majors and minors look a certain way. And so I was using this example earlier with someone, but and I'll kind of reiterate it to illustrate the point. Say, for example, we'll just use a really simple explanation. Let's just say, for example, the majors and minors are oversold and they're both crossed up. They're not in the channel. They're not, touching the threshold or anything. They're just both crossed up. The majors and minors are indicating buy, right? In and of themselves, they're indicating buy. If pressure is, say, green just popped on bottom and red, and they're both pointed down, that's actually a sell indication, and it just positioned you to sell, because that double cross is usually going to result in a small green candle or a doji or something that moved contrary to the direction you're looking to trade. So it's actually an awesome position to short. The green being on top and, say, sideways would imply short term up, possibly retracement of the previous candle. Generally, the previous candle is not very big, so maybe position with a 5 minute and then take a long trade for a scalp, 3 to 5 pips. If the green is on top for less than 3 candles and they're both pointed up, then you can take a more aggressive trade depending on when support and resistance, or where your support and resistance are, so on and so forth. And I can keep on going. I can go for days, right? So one instance would justify a sell flat out. Another instance would justify a buy. Another combination would justify a soft sell or a retracement sell. Another one would justify a soft buy or a stronger buy. And others would justify taking all that into account in combination with what time you're trading at for that currency pair, what currency pair it is, fundamentals, so on and so forth and so on. Essentially, it's virtually impossible for us to teach you every single combination of what would justify a buy and or sell in any particular instance, right? So you're left with having to experience that and learn it by way of experience, which is why we have ongoing education, continued education, right? So the challenge for coaches and for individuals such as myself that want to teach you guys this valuable thing that we've figured out is to convey to the best of our ability what we do in a more simplified version. So I know a lot of people, they know that I want to be in a trade for anywhere from a couple seconds to 15 minutes. If I'm in a trade for longer than 15 minutes, I'm frustrated. If I'm going to trade for more than 2 hours, I'm going to try to just take my first 1 pip that I can get out and make a break even. And I don't care if it goes 1,000 pips in my favor after that. Just get me out of that trade. I don't want to be in a trade for more than 2 hours. I feel like my time is more valuable than that. So that's my approach. Obviously, it wasn't always that way. At some point, I wanted to just take whatever I can have. It doesn't matter how long it took to get it, right? This is my 3 pips. It hasn't hit my hedge position yet. I don't care if I've been in this for 16 hours, right? I'm going to wait until I get my 3 pips, right? And so I understand that. But in that whole kind of mindset and processing that whole train of thought and following through to its end, I wanted to develop something to kind of give you guys a bird's eye view of how to position so that you're taking less drawdown on trades. Drawdown meaning the amount that the trade goes against you, and possibly to the extent that you save yourself from getting into trouble. Where if the drawdown was more extensive, you've actually been able to position in that respect, and then possibly open up additional trades where otherwise there wouldn't be trades. So there's a couple of disciplines that are really simple and basic that I want to discuss today. And I want you guys to consider the following rules. First of all, with the trend, you're going to take 50% of the distance between the current market price and your next support and resistance. Resistance is above you, support is below you. So if the trend is down and you're trading down, you're going to take 50% of the distance between your current market price and support. If the trend is up and you're trading up, you're going to take 50% of the distance between your current market price and resistance. If you're against the trend, you're going to take 25% of the distance between your current market price and your resistors, your support or resistance. So an example, if the trend is up and you're taking a down trade, you're going to take 25% of the distance between your current market price and your support, because support is below you and the trend is up, okay? If it's less than 3 pips, you don't have a trade. Don't take a trade that's less than 3 pips. For most of you guys, you trade on Capital City Market, the commission is about 60% of your first pip. That means that if you took 2 pips, you got 100% of the second one and only 60% of the first one. Plus spread, I mean, you already had to go 3 pips just to make a profit because the spread is 1.2. So it's not even worth taking anything less than 3 pips. So if it's less than 3 pips, don't take the trade. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. That's okay. Thank you. I was running late and my wife had to run back and give me the code for my TeamViewer, and everybody stops her, hey, Candace, they want to talk to her because she's scalping queen, right? 3 pips, 100 pips a day, 3 pips at a time. Everybody wants to talk to Candace. So I'm like, I've got 3 minutes and she's going back and people are just starting to show up. I called my partner and I was like, hey, can you give me my code? And she just came up right now. She's like, sorry. I was like, yeah, I knew it was going to happen. Anyway, so let's say that you are against the trend and you have 10 pips to support. The trend is up and you're selling and you've got 10 pips to support. 25% of 10 pips is 2.5 pips. You could round that up. Let's just say you've got 8 pips. So 25% of 8 pips is going to be 2 pips. You don't have a trade. Even though you have 8 pips of room, you can't justify that. You don't have a trade. And we're looking at a 60-minute chart, just for example. Let's say you've got 10 pips with the trend. You can take 5 of those, right? Because it's 50% with the trend. So this is a very safe and conservative approach. Plus, you're going to be positioning, so it's going to limit your drawdown. All right, another rule. The 5-minute, when using the 5-minute to position, you do not need to wait for the 5-minute to post overbought or oversold in order to use it to position in the direction you're positioning for. And you'll understand that here in a moment, because I'm going to have to replay some of these charts so you'll see where the entry would be. And then it'll start making sense. But I don't want you guys to take my word for it and this stuff. I want to teach you guys this stuff tonight. I want you guys to immediately go back to your charts, back test, and see it for yourself, because there's a lot here. But if you can get it, it's going to really simplify your approach, and it's going to mitigate your drawdown. It's going to save you from trades that would have otherwise not worked out. Ultimately, you're still going to have trades that don't do what you want them to do, in spite of your best efforts. That's okay, because we understand now that we have proper money management, proper exit strategy, which, by the way, if you guys didn't watch that video, I pulled it from YouTube. So you have to be a mastermind member in order to have access to the 5-part series. You don't have to wait for the 5-minute to post overbought or oversold. It just has to arrive overbought or oversold. And at the moment it arrives overbought or oversold, that's where you want to consider taking the trade, the position, the entry, if you're positioning with the 5-minute. So I'll break this down. I wanted to cover that. The 60-minute, if we're waiting for it to be overbought or oversold, it has to post overbought or oversold. No exceptions. So the 5-minute, you don't have to wait for it. 60-minute, you do have to wait for it. All right, let's get into this and it'll start making sense. And I'll reiterate that in a moment. I wanted to cover those few things because those are disciplines that we adhere to in the market, and that's what makes this really simple approach work. Okay, does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, and you will. And if you do, feel free to, what about the 5-minute and 15-minute disagree? Forget the 15-minute, Brad, you're wasting your time. No, that's, I don't rely a lot on the 15 or even 30 for that matter. They're just not as consistent. You can use them if you've got a system that works and you've got it nailed down and it's proven. You've been able to back test it over the course of years, and it looks like it's gonna benefit you. Awesome. Honestly, I just haven't wasted my time with it. I use the 5-minute, 30-minute, 60-minute, 240-minute, and 1 day because of those are the most common used time frames in the Forex market. And it's not because I want to do what the miners are doing or the majors are doing, but it is noteworthy to, understand what charts people are looking at, because a lot of times you're making your decisions based on posts. So is it going to be a 15-minute post? Well, maybe the 15th minute when the 5-minute rolls, right? Or the second 15-minute in a 30-minute candle, right? Or, so on and so forth. But normally it's going to be a 5-minute post, a 30-minute post, a 60-minute post, 240-minute post, or 1 day post that the vast majority of millions of day traders are making the decision on. Not a 1 minute, not a 2 minute, not a 15-minute, not a 120-minute. The vast majority of millions and millions of day traders worldwide are basing their entries a lot of times, because they're waiting for posts, are 5, 60, or 5, 30, 60, 240 in 1 day. You can even get into weekly and monthly charts, but those are the standards. I'm not saying you can't use a 120-minute chart. I'm not saying you can't use a 15-minute chart. I'm just saying this approach, and what we're looking at right now, is relative to be specific about tonight. It's going to be the 5-minute, the 60-minute, and the 240-minute, because we want to make it as simple as possible. We're going to start with the 60-minute, and then we're going to work our way up to the 240-minute. Okay. I want you guys to follow really closely, because you're going to feel like you get turned around. So if at any point you didn't follow conversation, because sometimes I talk faster, I think faster, and it comes out all jumbled, and I don't realize I didn't make sense. So if it doesn't, stop me and I'll explain. Okay. All right. 60-minute. We can see we have a long, right? Majors and minors were oversold. Now they're in the channel, both pointed up. Green just popped on top. So those two indications are saying we should consider a long trade in the euro versus US dollar. Now, if we're going to take a long trade, then if we want to position this long trade, let's say the trend is up, and you can see I drew the trend already on the 1 day, so you can see the trend is up. By the way, this is this month, so I just went back a couple of weeks and I started on a Sunday. So this is Sunday 3/12/2018. So you can see it's right here. This says Monday, of course, because for the market it was Monday. For us it was Sunday. Okay. All right. So right here we can see buy. Green just popped on top, so it's buy. So we're looking for a long position. Okay. Now, if we want to take a long and we want to position with the 5 minute, then we want for the 5 minute major minor to be oversold. That would position us. There's a ton of different ways to position. I'm giving you the most basic and simple. Okay. So we're saying buy on the 60, and that means we want the 5 minute to be oversold. Now, if we're with the trend and we have 15 pips roughly, how many of those pips can we take with the trend? Based 7.5. Yep, thank you. 7.5 pips from this point. If we did not position, we could justify 7.5 pips. Okay. Now we're going to wait for the 5 minute to oversell. If in that process the market moves 7.5 pips and this 5 minute did not get oversold before it moved 7.5 pips, we've missed our positioning. We don't take the trade. Okay. All right. So this is the same place as this. 123, 109, 123, 109, 123, 109. We're all in the same place right here. So now from this point, this posted, everything's posted in the same place. The 4 hour just posted, the 1 hour, and the 5 minute. And we have a long entry, indication on the 60 minute. We want the major minor on the 5 minute to be just oversold, fully oversold, green, red, gray, black, all below this thick red line. Okay. So I'm going to measure from here and see how much we picked up on positioning and how much we saved ourselves on drawdown. Okay, so I'm going to click forward, one candle. So initially it went 1.9, not 7.5. So we didn't miss our trade yet. Right now we only bought about 1.6 pips of positioning and about the same of drawdown. Had we entered right there, we would have been 1.6 pips drawn down. And since it posted there, that's the position is 1.6 pips, but it's not our entry yet, because majors and minors are not oversold. They look like they are, but they're not. Black and red red's on threshold, black's still in the channel. These are not oversold yet. All 4 lines oversold. How about there? Okay. So right there, we saved ourselves 4.5 pips of drawdown, and we positioned ourselves 3.9 pips. How many pips did we say we had before? 7.5 out of 15. So now we bought ourselves another 3.9. So let's say 4. So now we have 19. It's pretty close to 20. Could we take a 10 pip? Yeah, it's pretty close, right? Disregard the fact that this is a big green candle. Obviously, we already know what happens, because this is showing the end of the next 60 minutes. This is just showing the first 10 minutes of what happened within this 60 minute during this shadow right here. Okay. Now from right here, we're going to take 10 pips up. And 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes later, we're at about 3.3 and 1.5, or we went 3.3 and then about 1.5 pips profitable right now. We drew down about less than a pip. So this 20 minutes, 25, 30, 6.6, 35, 40, 8.6, 45, 10.6. Is that enough? Not quite. We need 11.2 because of spread, right? What about 11.6? That's enough. All right, so 50 minutes, less than a pip of drawdown, and we took a 10 pip trade on a Sunday afternoon. Okay, we're not done there yet. All right, we're going to go to our 240 minute. Now, if I go forward on my 240, you can see that this all looks different, right? Because now I went to the end of this 240. So when you're back testing, if you're using a 240, you have to lead with the 240. Otherwise, if I do this, watch this. The first candle that I move over, I'm going to see the end of the 240. So this is 4 hours later. This is just 1 hour into this 4 hour candle. So when you're back testing, if you're using the 240 to back test, you got to lead with the 240. In other words, when I click forward on my 240, this is the end of the 240, and that snaps my 60 minute to the end to match the end of the 240, and my 5 minutes to match the end of the 240. Okay, so you notice the prices are the same: 123,251, 123,251, and 123,251. Okay, so right here we've got a long indication. Some of you guys might disagree because it's overbought. That's okay. If you have a long indication, you feel like you might still get some long because of support and resistance. And I've already drawn in the support and resistance. I didn't set it. I literally just drew in the support and resistance. I picked a time, a Sunday, 2 weeks prior, and then I looked at what would be more obvious of signals. This one may not be more obvious for you, but nonetheless it's obvious. Majors and minors are pointed up, greens on top, starting to bend up, and we haven't touched resistance yet, which is about 14 pips away on the 240. Now we're using a 60, but I just want you guys to see that. So I didn't just cherry pick. I literally just did them at random, and we're just going to do them concurrently. Okay. All right. So 240 is buy. Now we're moving to the 240, which means we're positioning with the 60. Okay. And then we'll even take that a step further with the 5 minutes. So hang out with me. It's going to get just a little more complicated, but it is really simple. It's just going to sound complicated because I talk fast. All right. Hang on one second. Is that what support and resistance drawn historically or just on the hour chart? That is support and resistance on the hour chart, Darren. Thanks for asking. I think I answered that without seeing that comment. So, but I'm glad you asked it. Thank you. Okay, so here we have the indication for a long. Green is on top, so we've got a short-term bias in our favor, plus we got major minor still pointed up, and we have room to get to resistance on our 240-minute chart. So then we want for wait for major minor oversold on our 60-minute in order to enter for that long trade on the 240-minute. Okay, now if we're going with the trend, 14 pips, we can take about 7, right? Because it's with the trend, half of that distance. If we're using that because we're basing it on this chart, we would be cognizant of our other support and resistance. In this case would be to our next level of resistance is only about 8 pips, 8 or 9 pips. So really like 4, maybe 5 pips up on our 60-minute. And then on our 240-minute, it would be more like, maybe a pip or 2 more. So let's settle on 5 pips. And if we can buy ourselves some positioning, then we're going to try to take the 5 plus whatever we can get on positioning, right? Or 50% of the distance from where we position to our resistance. Okay, so we need major minor on the 60-minute to oversell. And they have to post there, not just arrive there, okay? Now, if we think that the majors and minors, or if we're waiting for major and minor to position us for a sell, we feel like, okay, we're likely to get some of that draw. And we want to consider a sell on the 60, then we can use the 5-minute to position us to see if we have anything that we could potentially take in profit while we wait for our setup for the long trade. Okay, you guys follow me there? So from here to here is about 20 pips, 19 pips. Let's call it 20. Against the trend, how many pips can we take? What was it? Yep, which is of 20 pips, 5 pips. Okay, so we need 5 pips. Now, if we're going to try to take 5 pips short, we need the 5-minute. So wait for major minor oversold or 5-minute major minor overbought to sell. At this very moment, 123.251, 123.251, 123.251, the 5-minute is overbought. So let's try to sell for 5 pips on the 5-minute. Okay, I'm going to minimize these just so you guys don't get confused. Okay, so now we want 5 pips down. If the market goes 7 pips up before we get to positioning, we missed our positioning, we don't take the trade long. So right now, if this goes up, draws down 7 pips, that's reasonable. For a 5-pip trade, that's more than reasonable. Even at a 70% win rate, you can justify a 10-pip stop and a 5-pip take profit, right? Okay, so we're looking for a short for 5 pips, and then we're going to review after we get our 5 pips if the major minor are oversold on the 60 or if we need to wait a little longer. Okay, so right now all we're going for is 5 pips from this point down. 2.3, 3.9, 4.9, 4.9. 45 minutes later, 7.1. Is that enough for a 5 pip trade? What was our drawdown? Anybody notice? Nothing. A micro pip of drawdown. 45 minutes, we get a 5 pip trade, waiting for our entry for our long position, right? Okay, so at this point right here, let's look at our 60. Now, let's see, let's go to the end of that 60. So right here, which is right here on a 5 minute, 123, 198, 123, 198. Are we oversold? Nope. And for some of you guys, Cameron, getting uncomfortable in your chair, you're like, I probably wouldn't wait much longer than that to go long. But we're simplifying it. So we're not going to try to complicate it. We're just simplifying it. So we want to wait for the major minor to get oversold unless it moves seven pips from this point, right? Or what was it? 8.4. So no, only 4 pips from that point, right? Or even, say to this level, 123, 298 before we position, because this is the level we're calling it because it's 50% of the distance between where we are here and there, and then whatever we position, we're adding to that and taking 50% of that distance instead, right? But we're not doing any of that unless major minor oversold. Now, if it moves up to that level before we position, we missed our position and we don't get to take that trade, okay? All right, so let's see if we get oversold. Nope. Nope, definitely didn't get oversold, right? And now we've moved up beyond that other level. So did we miss, if our approach is to position, did we miss anything? No, right? Because our approach was to position. So if that's our approach because that's what works, we don't feel like we missed anything. So when that happens, you don't say, oh man, I missed the trade, and you get all bent out of shape about it to the point where you miss it 2 more times and you start convincing yourself that you're not going to position anymore. You're just going to start taking that trade until it bites you in the butt and you realize, wow, the 4 times that I won was offset by the 1 time that I lost. So it really wasn't worth it to do 5 trades to lose money, right? Okay, so don't let that be your mentality. Whatever your rules are, be consistent with them and make sure that all right, Hubert, no worries. If you're on the mastermind, you might have to catch up by watching the video because we talked about some rules early on. But welcome. All right, so let's go back to our 240-minute chart. Nope, not that one. Our other 240-minute chart. Okay, so back here, we had that long trade, and we missed our positioning, but we did get a 5 pip short in the interim. Okay. Right here, we'll skip that one because that was part of the previous long. And right here, obvious, right? So you think. So major minor crossed, pointed down, committed because they've entered the channel. Green's on top. It is bent down. There's separation, but nonetheless, it's not a great sell signal in spite of popular belief. We're against the trend. There's all kinds of stuff. Nonetheless, we got a short indication. We won't get too technical. All right, short. So if we're going to short this, we want to see the major minor on the 60-minute overbought, right? Now, if we think that the major minor are going to buy a little bit, then we could wait for the 5-minute to become oversold and then try to buy into the 60, right? Now, from this point, with the trend, we only have about, 2-3 pips. What's 50% of 3? 1.5. What's the minimum take profit? 3. Do we have a trade yet? Nope. So we don't do anything. Even if we're not positioning, we don't do anything, right? So from this point, we don't want to move too far up here. Okay, let's say we don't want to move 5 pips. Otherwise, we missed our positioning with our 5 minute to take a long. Okay. So now we want our 5 minutes to oversell. Okay. That moved like a whopping 1.9 pips. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20, 25. Are we oversold? No. 30 minutes later. This takes patience, guys. You waited 30 minutes. The most you had gotten had you entered there was 3 flat, which is not enough to get out of a 3 pip trade because you need spread, 4.2. Here, we positioned ourselves another 5.5 pips and we saved ourselves 6.8 pips of drawdown. Not a bad situation, but we didn't have enough pips to take a trade anyways. So we have 5.5 pips of positioning plus the 3, which makes 8. How many pips can we take from this point? 4, right? Because we're going with the trend. 50% of the distance between the current market price and the resistance level is 8. 50% of that is 4 pips. So from here, we want to move 4 pips up. So we enter for a long trade. 1, 2, we've drawn down about 2.4 pips. So that's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5.9. Is that enough to be out of the 4 pip trade? Okay, there's 4 pips. All right, or we take nothing, right? I mean, it's your choice. Okay, now we're still waiting to get overbought on the 60 minute to short with the 40. Okay, so let's go forward and see if we get to overbought and how we feel at that point. Okay, are we overbought? Nope, right? And this has to post overbought. So there's no, well, it kind of arrived there and then pulled back. No, it didn't post overbought, so it's not overbought. 60 has to post. 5 minute just has to arrive. Okay, next candle. All right, are we overbought? Yep, overbought, major and minor. Very clearly, this is not on the channel. These are all above, not in the halo of this. They're clearly overbought. We just bounced on resistance. We pulled back a little bit. Okay, now we were looking initially to sell with the 240, right? But we only have about 12 pips between our current market price and resistance. How many pips can we take of that against the trend? 3 pips. Okay, 3 pips. If we are going to sell for 3 pips, we could even go back and say, well, maybe we should position with the 5 minute, or we could say, you know what, we're positioning with the longer term. Let's just try to knock out our 3 pips and be done with it. So let's look at both, okay? Because if you did position, you would wait for the 5 minutes to be overbought. If you got the 5 minutes to be overbought and then you sold, you may be able to take maybe a little bit more, right? Or just stick with your 3 and be out sooner. Or you just enter here, throw caution in the wind, and try to be out in a reasonable amount of time. Okay. Now, if your positioning didn't work and it went the 3 pips that you would have otherwise tried to get in profit, but you didn't miss anything because your goal was to position. So now we're compounding it, right? Because we were using the 60 to position for the 240, and now we're going taking it a step further and saying, well, since we're going to short, we'd rather give ourselves a more ideal situation. So let's wait for the 5 minutes to be overbought before we short for the 60, which we've positioned for the 240. Okay, and if it doesn't happen, big deal. You know, I didn't get it, and that's okay. It didn't give me what I was looking for, and it's fine, right? So if you're playing tight and conservative, you can really kind of compound these. It takes patience. It takes a level of patience, but it's worth it, especially if you're already really nervous going into the market, right? Okay, so let's look at it from both perspectives. We're going to see, can we position up overbought, major minor overbought on the 5 minute before this goes 3 pips short, or would we have just been able to get in right away because we were positioning using the 60, positioning with the 60 for the 240? Okay, so let's look at both. Forward, that bought us about 5.5 pips. We're not overbought yet, so we're not done. And there is, are we overbought? Who said it?
Yes.
So when it arrived, it's likely that the miners were overbought, right? So as you're watching it, so this is where we're going to replay a chart. We just need them to arrive, not post. So let's play this. And right when it arrives, I'll draw a line. Erase that. So I'm going to play this single chart. Okay. All right. So we want major and minor to be overbought. I'm going to speed this up so we don't have to watch the whole thing. We'll go 5 times the speed, just so it doesn't happen too fast. Nope, not yet. Watch for that black line to clear the threshold. See if it happens on this candle. We're about 2.5 minutes into this candle, or 1.5 minutes now, about 2 minutes into this candle. About 2.5 minutes in. Never really got overbought. Not yet, right? So let's see. Let's wait. Let's see. 2 seconds. Okay. All right. So technically we are, but again, we're kind of in the halo. Let's be obviously overbought. Okay. And sometimes you're just going to be like, gosh, it was just too specific, Hiram. I missed it again, but when it doesn't work in your favor, you're going to be glad that you waited. All right. So we're still waiting. By the way, while you're waiting for positioning, if things start to change, 60 minutes starts to look different, 240 starts to look different, you may want to reevaluate, especially if you waited too long. If you're waiting like 4 hours for positioning, you're going to want to reevaluate the 4-hour chart, right? Okay, so let's wait for these to get overbought. And as soon as they do, I'll try to pause it when they're obviously overbought. Wait for it. Let's go 10 times the speed. This is too slow for me. Be patient. I'm telling you guys to be patient. That's a little clearer, right? Okay, let's mark it from right there. All right, play this, and then I'm going to back up, and I'm going to speed this sucker up so I can have posted candles. Okay. So right there, it went up, pulled down. Now from that point, we have, so if we're looking to sell on the 60, right, because we're positioning, then we would be looking to sell from this point where that candle ended, right, to that point, which was about 12 pips. And this bought us, let's go back here, this bought us about 6 pips, which puts us to about 18 pips. 18 pips from our positioning down. So what do we take? It's against the trend. So we'll say 20. So 5 pips. Okay. So from that line where we entered, so we didn't enter at the end of this candle. We entered when major and minor, actually it was this candle. We entered when major and minor were overbought, which is on the wick of this candle. Major and minor arrived overbought. So now we want 5 pips because we're against the trend down. And right there's 2.5, 5.6, almost there. You think that did it? There you go, 13.5 drawdown, maybe a half a pip, 5 micro pips. You got your 5 pip trade. Okay. All right. Now we're still waiting, by the way, for our 60-minute to get oversold. And again, from the point where we were waiting, which was here, or overbought, sorry, to sell, we are now right here, and we decided we were going to position to sell because that's what we were positioning for. And we took that profit. We're using the 240 positioning with the 60, and then even taking it a step further and positioning with the 5. Now, had we just taken it with the 60, then we would have only gone for, what do we say, 3 pips? And we would have got it, right? We would have drawn down 6.6 pips, and that was our positioning, which allowed us to take 5 pips and a much more comfortable trade, and we still would have got our 3 pip there. But that went 7.4, where we got in before to down was more like 13 pips. So we ended up with a really comfortable 5 pip trade and a quick in and out versus having to wait for the drawdown and then the comeback and then the profit, especially against the trend, right? Okay, so either way that would have worked. We positioned with our 60 for a 240 trade, but we didn't overthink it. We didn't say, well, it's a 240 minutes, so I'm going to go for 1,000 pips, right? We said, what is our support and resistance? We used that. We justified it that way. Had we tried to take any more from this entry position, more than 7 pips, actually 6 pips, we would have lost because that's 7.4. That's barely enough to get a 6 pip trade. In my opinion, if I want to get 10 pips, I want to be able to see at least 20. If I'm being truthful, I want to see at least 50 because I want to get it quick in and out, right? So if I want to see 50, I want to see 150 in front of me. If I want to get 50, I have 2 trades, a 10 pip and a 50 pip, a 5-0, 50 pip or 10. That's all I do. My process, especially early on, is so simple, it's almost embarrassing. I see your guys' charts and I'm like, holy cow, you probably don't understand pressure, majors and minors, and you got all this crap on here, and you're trading how many currency pairs? Think about it. If I'm talking about just a 60-minute chart, and I can explain to you multiple combinations of things that would justify either a buy or a sell with the same indication on just the majors and minors, much less same indication on pressure, same indication on TNTs, on one currency pair. Okay, let's just be conservative, and let's just say there's 1,000 different combinations that would justify a buy in one situation, a sell in another situation, 1,000 different combinations. Okay, now times that by however many other currency pairs you're trading, and consider that when I'm doing these things, I'm considering what time it is, right? For that currency pair, I'm considering fundamentals, technical analysis, the average volume, the OHLC in that particular currency pair, any kind of geopolitical issues that are going on in that currency pair, so on and so forth and so on. So if you can honestly tell me that you can master that in more than 3 currency pairs, cool. You've probably been doing this for a while. Otherwise, scale it down. I trade probably 80% of my trades in the euro versus US dollar, and everything else is within 5 other currency pairs. And I better be up to speed on those currency pairs. And it just so happens that those other currency pairs correlate very closely with the euro versus US dollar, GBP USD, right? And US dollar, GBP in the Eurozone, even though they Brexited, it's not done yet. GBP JPY, GBP AUD, USD JPY. Again, JPY, GBP JPY, USD. So a lot of the same ones, right? Me and Aussie Cat have a love and hate relationship, so I won't mention that one. And even though USD, what's that?
Which was your love hate relationship?
Oh, the Aussie Cat, Australian dollar versus Canadian dollar. So, I mean, really, I could probably sum up my trading history for the last 6 months in the GJ, the EU, and the GU, the British pound, US dollar, British pound, Japanese yen, and euro US dollar. That's probably like my last 6 months, just to give you an idea. All right. And 80% of that still is in the euro versus US dollar. So I'm just dabbling in the other ones. Okay. So we took what we could out of the short, and we were really conservative. I'm going to go forward on the 240 minute. Now we have a long move. Major and minor are both cross pointed up with the trend. Green is on top of red still, and they're both kind of angled up, right? We do have a resistance level right here. We're taking into account it's only about 4 pips away. And we have a similar resistance level right here on the 60 minute. 123.410 and 123.391. So they're literally like a pip in difference between the 240 and the 60 minute. They're basically the same line. Andre, for my trend, I'm using the 1 day. So right here. There you go. So there's the 1 day trend. Well, not the 1 day trend, the trend on a 1 day chart.
Did you manually draw that, or are you using
No, I manually drew. So did I manually draw this, or am I using a study? It's parallel rays. So the way I have my parallel rays set up is I have Fibonacci levels in parallel rays, but when I first draw my parallel rays, I don't have the Fib levels showing, so I can select which ones I want to show, so that I don't have a whole bunch of drawings on my chart. I like to keep my chart as clean as possible. Generally, I would only have this is orange. I know it's 23.6 because it's orange. I also color code them. Above 23.6 is what? Fibonacci. 38.2. And then the black level is 50%. And I know above the black level is 61.8. And the two that are together are 76.4 and 78.6. So I only have to color code two of them, and I know exactly where I'm within the Fibonacci sequence in my parallel rays tool. So my parallel rays give me a top and bottom. So for example, let's go back right there, just to give you an example here. So I can catch my bottoms, right? And I got three levels of, I just pulled somewhere random, so sorry if this is not beautiful. 1, 2, 3 points. I've got a whole stream right there. It's following that same angle here, and then I can right click on it, go to chart drawing properties, and a lot of times I want to guess where I think 50% is going to be. So I'd like 50% to be somewhere right here, right across here. And that's about where it is. And then if I'm here, then I know that I'm going to need 23.6, and I'm already beyond that. And then 38.2 just to give me another barrier. So I'm already below 23.6. The only thing that stopped me from creating new low is the bottom of the trend, in which case every day that goes by, this moves up and further. And so then you can align that sometimes with support and resistance. So I don't need the 61.8, 78.6, 76.4 because I'm way down here. That's not relevant to me. So I'm not going to draw it in and gum up my charts. And I mean, we're just kind of slapping this together, guys. So don't quote me on this stuff. There's one right there. Let's use that one because that one is above the trend. So a lot of times if you want to play it safe, you've got a trend line and then you've got a support level where the trend hasn't hit yet. And that's 28.2 pips away. If we're against the trend, which is up, then you can, 13 or 14 pips or what have you to the short side, obviously positioning because this is a day chart. And obviously we blew right through that. That's not the way I want you guys to trade. Let's just be clear. All right. We just got lucky there. Actually, I knew it was going to be a red one because I backed it up. But anyway, just kind of showing you how the parallel rays work. Okay. Major, minor on the 240 are posted, pointed up. Green is on top of red, and they're both kind of angled up. We know we have about 4 pips of room between our current market price and resistance, which is only a 2 pip trade. So if we want to position this, then we want to see our 60-minute oversold, right? Now again, we can wait for the major minor oversell to take the buy with the 240, and in that process, if we feel like we can position with the 5-minute to sell into that, then we could potentially get a trade there as well. Now from here to here is only about 1 pip. So we don't have enough to take 25% of 1 pip and make a significant trade. So we have to position with the 5 to even justify taking a short trade. So now we just have to arrive overbought, right? So I'm going to replay this chart from right here and tell me when we arrive overbought. And I'm nearing the end here, guys. So if you guys have questions, Brad, it's not how many days I capture to show trend. I want at least 3 validations on top and bottom to validate. So it's not necessarily a desired amount of days. It's however many days it takes to get those 3 validations. And I want the slopes to match. So the tops and bottoms. And I don't like when the bottom out of the top or the bottom, which is why I don't use linear regression or RAF regression, because RAF regression is much wider and it takes into account the average of wick and shadow, not just body. Linear regression takes into account just the body, in which case you end up having the body of the candle sticking out of the tops and bottoms of linear regression. So RAF regression is too wide, linear regression is too tight. So I use parallel rays and draw them in myself. Okay. So we're going to replay this 5-minute chart and tell me when we're overbought, when we arrive overbought on the 5-minute. Okay. So it's going to start at the end of this candle. This is the last 5 minutes of this 60-minute candle. So let's get to the end of this candle first of all. We want to be overbought. So we're waiting until after this candle because this is the last candle on the 60-minute. So it's after this candle, the 60-minute will post the way it looks right now, and you'll notice that the price will be the same. So hold on 1 second. Okay. Did you see what happened? There's a big old gap. It happened quick. As soon as that candle ended, the next one opened way up here. Are the majors and minors overbought yet? On the 5-minute, not yet, right? Okay. Let's wait for it. I better slow this. Oh, okay, it's already slowed down. Good. Okay. Come on. Did they even get there? Come on. This is taking too long. Let's go 2 times the speed. How's that? Okay. How about 5 times the speed? Looks like we may have missed it altogether, right? Because from here, we only had like 1 pip before, and from there, we bought ourselves 5 pips, which would have been 6, and that would have been a 3-pip trade. And let's see if we go 3. Actually, we go from wick because we weren't over. Yeah, 4.6. So we would have just missed it. We never got fully overbought. So we would have unfortunately just missed that one. Tough breaks, but it happens. It was pretty tight anyway, right? Okay. So that one gapped way up there. Had the miners just got just a little further up, that would have been a nice clean trade. Within 5 minutes, we would have been out of that 3-pip trade. Okay. Let's see. Do I have another one in here? Yeah. All right. Let's try to cover this last one. I got about 4 minutes. Oh, you're welcome, Brad. Okay. So here, majors are crossed down, minors are crossed down. Obviously, it's soft. Green is leaning into red, but it hasn't posted below, so it's really soft. Nonetheless, we can see we got a mile. We got about 40 pips there, but let's look at our 5-minute. This is the same place: 123.281, 123.281, 123.281. Everything is the same, right? So we want for our majors and minors on our 60 to be overbought. Right now, if we think that we could get some buy out of that, then where do we want our 5-minute? Oversold, right? Now, are we oversold here? Right? So we could go there. I would say we're not, right? We want to be clearly oversold, like the example of the 60-minute. In this case, we don't have to be posted, but we just need to arrive oversold. So somewhere, and it's likely to have happened right at the beginning of the next one. So we'll say we'll start here, right? Now, from here to the buy side, which is what we're waiting for on the 60 to position us with the trend, we have about 5 pips, 5.5, so 6 pips. So a 3 pip trade, right? So we'll look for a 3 pip here, and then for those of you guys that are a little more conservative, we'll wait for the 5 to give us an even more clearer oversell, okay? Definitely oversold there. Erase that. All right, we're going to look for both. So from there, we were looking for 3. From here, we got an additional 3. So we could probably do 4 from there, right? So we'll take half of that, which is 1.5. So we had 3 here, and then we bought ourselves an additional 3 there. And if you cut that in half, that's 1.5. So it's 4.5, but we'll call that spread, right? So we'll go for 4 on this one, which isn't a really big trade. And we'll go for 3 here. Mind you, this is a Sunday afternoon. Oh, come on. So right there, we move about 2 pips. 3, we're not out of that 4 pipper yet. 3.4. There we go, 4.4, almost there. No. All the way back, look at that. What is that? 4.5, nope, not there yet. Nope, there we go. There's 5.7, an hour and 5 minutes later. And from here, we were only looking for 3, which we should have got. We're not out, probably not out yet. Close, 3.1, and that'll do it. So we got both of them regardless. One of them would have drawn down about 4 or 5 pips. The other one would have drawn down virtually nothing and then took profit. And actually, the one that we used to position we're patient with obviously filled first. And then had we entered prior to that, we wouldn't have been stopped out or anything. But we would have seen more drawdown, less pips, so less desirable result. Moral of the story, be patient. For those of you guys that are part of the mastermind, this will be uploaded, so you'll be able to review it later. If you guys have any questions, I'm out of time, but I will be in the hall for a moment. So feel free to approach me and ask questions. Actually, I'll be in the foyer area here. I appreciate you guys coming out tonight. And Matt Parkin, I believe, will be presenting tonight. So always in for a treat with Matt Parkin. Thanks for your time, guys. You have a good night.